I'm back. This week, we dive into a really cool double feature with Chris Brenton of Active Countermeasures. In the first segment, Matt Alderman and we're going to go talk about the things we love, problems, how they're solving it, the value they create. And in the second segment, Ron Gula is going to join us. And we're going to get a little bit more into how he evaluates these types of technologies, which is going to be great if you're a leader trying to evaluate technologies. This is a show you're going to love, especially if you're trying to wrap your heads around threat hunting. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Brought to you by today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out AutoMox. AutoMox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. AutoMox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hello and welcome. Welcome back. It's Business Security Weekly, episode number 99. We're going to call this the Gretzky, and we're recording this Monday, September 17th, 2018. This is the show where we look at the business of security with an effort to improve the security of business. Really, our goal here is to be your trusted source for actionable insights, leadership, communication, and innovation. Try to bring them all together, look at them from a lot of different perspectives, and help you. And yes, I'm back. It's been an interesting summer. Still Michael Santarcangelo. I'm still going to be your straight talking guide to elevated performance and accelerated results. And even though I've been gone, I've been learning a lot. I've been reflecting a lot. So much to share, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the format for today's show, too. And in the first segment, I'm joined by the always remarkable Matt Alderman.
Hello. Welcome back, Michael. It's been so long.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for stepping in so much and helping out. You've been great, and it's been a lot of fun. It was a weird summer. Basically, my dad died, and then when we got done and we came back, it was time to evacuate for a hurricane, which they thought was going to bear down on Myrtle Beach. The brunt of it went to North Carolina. In fact, where we live, we're fine. We got back home last night. No damage to where we live. Kids are safe. We're safe. Everybody's safe. It's an interesting thing to be evacuated if you've ever done it or never done it, and I will try to reflect on some of that. Maybe for a future episode we can put together some sort of a segment, some things that I've learned. Some of you have reached out. I really appreciate that. But we're safe. It's been interesting. It's been a couple weeks, but we're back, and it feels so good to be back. And this show is neat. I mean, I couldn't have asked for it better. So Matt is joining me for the first segment, and he might stick around for the second. Ron Gula is joining me for the second segment. He's actually listening into the first segment, so you might hear him chime in. And we've got Chris Brenton with us, and we're going to introduce him in a second. We'll bring him on, but just let me first kind of set up what we're looking at. We're trying to take a look at a popular topic like threat hunting, popular and also popularly confusing for some people. And then what we're going to do is Matt and I are going to take a look at it from more of that business perspective. What's the problem you're trying to solve? How do you fit in the marketplace? What value do you create, right? We're going to look at those things that we like to classically look at. And Ron's going to join us, and he's bringing forward a lot of the stuff that he looks at when he evaluates these. And he's looked at dozens, if not hundreds, of companies like this, plus his pretty impressive pedigree. And that, to me, that's fun because we get to go into some of these details. But think about that if you're a security leader or you're involved in any of these types of decisions. Learning the way somebody like Ron looks at this and the questions that he asks, absolute leg up on anything you're trying to do. And it's kind of a neat way to tie this together. So we're going to see how it goes. And if it works well, there might be something we try again. Well, let me make a quick announcement. DerbyCon is holding its first ever mental health and wellness workshop. If you want to help support their efforts, go to derbycon.com/wellness. I think it's great. I think anytime we can have these conversations and do these types of things is great. I hope that if you're going to be there, that you participate and you're part of it. All right, so let's introduce Chris Brenton. He's the COO of Active Countermeasures. Now, you've heard about them on the show. Paul's involved, John Strand's involved. They brought Chris on, and they have done nothing but talk swimmingly about Chris. I think it's still nice to say swimmingly. I think technically Chris is the bee's knees, but he's got a pretty impressive background himself. And so what's great is he can talk business, and we can get into the technical stuff of it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about threat hunting. And so, Chris, welcome to Business Security Weekly, and thanks for joining us for a pretty straight talk conversation here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, so we did some prep, and Matt pointed out we should probably start by saying, okay, so threat hunting, what is it? What does it actually mean? So, Chris.
Yeah, so this is still kind of open to interpretation. If you think about when cloud first started up, everybody was labeling their stuff as cloud. There was a lot of confusion. If you look at like Oracle started off saying, oh, the cloud doesn't exist, it's all BS. And then all of a sudden they invented it. We're kind of in that same area with threat hunt right now, whereas I have my interpretation and my definition of what it means. But then when I see what a lot of other people are defining as threat hunting, I see a lot of that is also including incident handling and forensics. To me, threat hunting has one goal. Do I have compromised systems on my network? Yes or no. That's it. It's a simple binary answer to that. If you go at it from that aspect, it's fairly easy to cut through a lot of the noise to figure out what you need to do.
Oh, I like that. Now, when you do that, oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, I had a couple questions already.
Go for it.
So if we think about the security lifecycle, right? We have these preventive-based technologies, detection, response, and then this concept of protect. I've seen threat hunting kind of span into those different areas, right? And so, in your pure sense of the threat hunting definition, is it really just a simple detection kind of component that says, do I have a beaconing device or a compromised device, more of a detection, and then you leave the rest of the pieces to the other players in the marketplace, or does it actually span a couple of those buckets?
Well, so here's the thing you get into. It ends up being a very slippery slope. So imagine I'm doing a threat hunt where I'm looking at my network traffic. I see an internal Windows system that looks like it's beaconing. I go in and I check my SIEM and I see that there's some log entries here I don't recognize. So I jump on the system and I start looking for, what application is actually holding open that port. If you think through like the last third of what I talked about, I triggered into incident handling mode without actually initiating it internally. And that means I could end up stepping on other people's feet. That means I could end up missing things. But I also kicked into forensics mode, which again, we have very good defined processes for that. And if we start having threat hunting overlapping that, again, we're going to start stepping on toes. We're going to start making mistakes.
You know what? You just set up my question. That was even better. My question is usually going to be around maturity, right? So if I look at Straight Talk, the last question I ask is, are we ready? And in this case, when we talk about threat hunting, my question is, so is there a maturity level required, either of the organization of the security team or of the individuals themselves? I mean, do we have to have a pretty robust forensics practice in place? Do we already have to have incident response in place? How do you take a look at who is threat hunting for? Is there somebody that should be considering it? Is there somebody who you should say, you'll get there, but you're not ready yet?
So I think it's that Moore's technology adoption curve thing. I think most of the folks that are in it today are innovators, innovators and early adopters. So a lot of what we have out there for tools today are, hey, here's a ton of data about your network. Some of it might have to do with the system being compromised. Here, go look at it and see if there's anything in there you actually find interesting. And now we're a threat hunting tool. And if you're a John Strand, you can do that. You can sift through that data. You can, write the proper SQL select statements to extract out only the bits you need to actually figure out, has the network been compromised or not? When you look at your typical security team, and again, large enterprise, this starts to change a bit, but typical security team is either, it's anywhere from like one person doing everything. So they're involved with, configuring the firewall, make sure the security attestations are in place and all the controls are there for auditors and threat hunting and, you name it, it comes down to that one person. Or then it eventually grows into, you maybe have somebody running that security team. You have one, maybe two senior security people that, are not a John Strand, but close to it. And then you have a couple of middle people. And then, oh, hey, we can get interns really cheap. Let's bring in interns as much as we can. When you look at that type of an environment, okay, now when you look at who could do the threat hunting, it's the senior people, right? And that's it. Well, your senior people are vetting your new security solutions. They're writing your processes. They're writing your run books. They don't have time for you to turn around to them and say, and you need to threat hunt the network every day. There's just no bandwidth for it. So again, who's ready for this? It's those folks that are in that innovator, early adapter category that understand threat hunting, that they're in security for the love of security. They don't they don't go through PCAP files because there's some job related function to do it. They're doing it because they have a passion for it and they want to. Same thing with log entries. It's going to take us a little bit to get to where the majority of folks are actually ready to be able to do threat hunting, and that's going to come from better tooling.
So
make sense?
Yeah. So I should have log management in place. I should probably have incident response team in place, probably forensics. Then I'm probably mature enough to start thinking about being a little more proactive and do active threat hunting on my networks, right? Because without those basics, you're putting the cart way before the horse.
Well, so if you think about threat hunting as a black box for a second. We have an input and an output. What needs to come into it? Well, we need some way to collect the information and figure out, are we compromised, yes or no? We also need to understand those outputs. And that may be a formalized incident handling process. That may be a team that does forensics. That might just simply be a policy that says, hey, when a system gets compromised, throw it away and put a new system on the wire. It sounds silly, but that is a possible answer to that question. So a company that has no more of an answer to, have I been compromised, throw the system away and start over, yeah, they could actually adapt and start using this as well. But like I said, if you're at that point, it's kind of that, like you're saying, it's that maturity path. If I don't have my incident handling together, if I don't have my forensics together, I probably don't have the talent on staff I need to be able to go in and do threat hunting.
Complete sense.
Yeah. And
so
there's a cool. Well, I just want to throw this out, Chris. You don't even necessarily have to answer it, but you said something I thought was interesting, which is a lot of the senior level talent that we have, they're the ones that get excited about this. They want to do this. They're capable of doing this because they've put the time in. They have the experience to do it. But gosh, we also need them helping us design architectures and evaluating security solutions and taking a look at our entire posture.
Yeah.
Do we end up,
so to me, that's two different groups. You have the kind of innovator bit weenies, and yeah, they're totally in love with just decoding packets for the sake of decoding packets, and they'll kind of latch onto this. When you talk about a senior person who's part of a security team, whether it just be a generic team or a SOC or whatever, they're not. One of the things we go through in our sales cycle is I'll get someone senior on the phone and they'll immediately push back, not because they don't understand threat hunting. It's not because they don't necessarily recognize that it needs to be done in their environment. They're looking at, I already work 55 hours a day. I recognize this is something we're probably going to have to do on a daily basis. So now I'm going to have, 60. I'm going to be working 60 hours a week instead of 55 hours a week if we buy this product. Yeah, no, I don't want to go there. So again, when you start talking about the senior folks that are part of these teams, a very small number of them are going to be kind of that innovator, bit weenie. Yeah, I want to play with it for the sake of playing with it. For a lot of folks, this is a job. And it's a job that also goes along with training the people that are below them, writing the processes, writing the run books, and they're just going to look at it as, oh my God, I don't have time for this. We have one customer that was kind of cool. They're it's a fairly major city out in the Midwest. The security team for the city is 2 people. That's it. They only have 2 people working all the security. So they were looking at this like, we don't have the bandwidth. What do we do? We were actually able to work through it with them to kind of create a run book that they could actually hand to their help desk team. So the help desk, which is a much larger team, gets a ticket every morning, and someone on the help desk grabs that ticket, grabs the run book, goes through the process, looks at all the little pictures with the little red lines through it. Hey, if you see this, make this note, let this person know. And they kind of do the first pass on it. When you kind of think about what do we need out of threat hunting tools to make this more mainstream, really it's tools that actually do that kind of has that built into the tool itself, not just, hey, here's a ton of information and hopefully you can figure out what it actually means.
Yeah, good luck. All right, so
because we already have a ton of tools that collect a ton of data, right?
Oh,
which starts to lead me into what is that problem that threat hunting's trying to solve, right? If I have a lot of this data from my other tools, then why threat hunting? What is specific about threat hunting that we need different tools or better tools because we're trying to solve what problem? What is that?
So it's that same, again, Moore's technology adoption curve. When you look at who creates this stuff, it's the innovators, it's the early adopters. So as an innovator early adopter, I'm creating a tool that just by default is going to appeal to me. So this is going to be a tool that collects a lot of information because, wow, how cool is it that I can see everything on my environment? And then I will educate myself to be able to take it to the next step. What we need for mass market is that last piece of it, I'm going to educate myself to take it to the next step. That actually needs to get built into the product so that what an analyst gets is not, hey, here's a couple of terabytes worth of log entries. You can go in and you can write some select statements to try and thin it out, but good luck finding anything. Because I'm also really big on threat, and this is not a firm definition for me, but it is something I'm really passionate about, which is, for me, threat hunting's on the network. It's not at the host level, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, go back, oh God, I hate to date myself, but why not? Go back 15, almost 20 years ago, and I was the guy who wrote the SANS Institute's first training course for log analysis. And I looking back at it now, I see what I was trying to do was threat hunting, but I was trying to do it with system logs. And oh my God, I mean, think about what you have with system logs for a second. First of all, we've got a standard that was written in '88 by a guy at a university for his own use that a bunch of other people looked at and said, yeah, that looks great. Let's make it an RSC, and everybody will use it. So syslog and everything that kind of derives off that in general is just designed to be just way too generic. I can't go in and say, grab me all the log entries with the security priority set, because there isn't one. That wasn't a concern at the time this was created. So I need to go in and kind of dig through other means. I'm digging through log entries that have absolutely nothing to do with security. It's kind of that. Let's say I'm looking at an Apache web server. Most of what comes out of Apache has nothing to do with security. I don't care. But the way our tools are set up, I kind of have to do that on the first pass and figure out what I don't want to see before I can get anything useful. Now, if you roll out Nginx on the exact same platform that Apache was on, I'm going to get totally different logs. So all that stuff I did for Apache doesn't apply to Nginx. And oh my God, change platforms from like Linux to Windows and it gets even worse. So when you start looking at logging and you start looking at trying to do threat hunting at logging, you find out you spend more time writing parsers than you do actually doing the threat hunting. What I like about doing it at the network level is it's very clear and concise. In other words, attackers can try and hide their tracks, but at the end of the day, they can't hide memory. They got to stick their packets out in the wire just like everybody else. So it tends to kind of even the playing field for those that are breaking into systems and those of us that are trying to detect the attacks take place. So I tend to be more network-based versus log-based, because it gives a much smaller, better defined playground to go in and do all this stuff in. And it also means you're far less likely to slide into, oh, wait, we went into incident handling and forensics mode 4 steps ago. Hopefully we didn't taint our evidence trail if we actually need it.
So that's interesting.
So then does threat hunting try to focus those network events into something specific to kind of just really identify where those anomalies on the network are? Is that basically what threat hunting problem is trying to solve?
There's a number of ways you can go after this. One is you can try and pattern match. You can go in and look and say, hey, I saw a DNS cat on the wire before. DNS, so you're almost acting like an AV. Here's DNS cat. Here's what makes it a little bit different versus everything else. So I'll go in and I'll just try and match on that. You can do it heuristically. You can go in and you can do it, try and take like an AI approach to it. You can do an abstraction layer that's intelligence, where you go in and say, John Strand has an awesome saying, which is beaconing plus blacklist equals, oh my God, we're in trouble. In other words, if I go on the network and I see a system that is clearly exhibiting beacon-like behavior and it's doing it to an IP address that's on a known blacklist, you're owned. Threat hunt over at that point, kick off incident mode. You definitely get a compromise taking place. So how you go about doing that, I think that's some of the fun with this vertical, is we're still kind of figuring out what's the best way to go about it.
No, I like that. That's kind of interesting. All right, so let's talk about your approach a little bit then, because you just said there's a couple different ways to do it, and you said something in a prep that I really liked, and we set it up a little bit today too. How do you make this accessible to somebody other than the superstars, the people that both love this and have the experience to do it? Because if we keep consolidating these things in a limited set of people, we're never really going to grow better. So let's talk about your approach. So how is ACM, how are you guys solving this problem and why?
So I think a lot of it is we looked at, we decided not to go after the elusive 1%. By that I mean, when you look at the kind of malware threatscape, there's always a 1% that never fits. In other words, you can say, oh yeah, like beaconing. You can go in and you can say, okay, we're going to try and detect beacons, and someone will say, well, I'll just write malware that'll beacon once every 5 days and you'll never connect to me. Or you'll never catch me. Well, yeah, that's probably a true statement. And oh, by the way, you've just created malware that if you issue a command to your compromised server, you're not going to know if you got a response back in like 10 days. So as a backdoor, it's kind of useless, because before you can issue 3 or 4 commands, they're probably going to find you through AV or some other means anyway. So we've decided not to go after that elusive 1%. And, we kind of looked at, what do we need for data? What do we need for data to be able to go through and do a really good job at identifying, is an internal system compromised, yes or no? And by analyzing for that beacon-like behavior, for looking for things like persistent connections that stay open all the time, when you go in and you analyze, DNS, do you have 50,000 fully qualified domain names that appear to exist within a domain you've never heard of before? That's a pretty good indication that something bad's going on. So as a first pass, we kind of looked at, what can we go after to catch 99% of what's out there? Then what we said is, all right, so we've got 2 choices now. One choice A is, let's generate a ton of engineering time into trying to grab that last 1% and keep throwing data in people's faces. Or let's reallocate that time to take the data we have to work with and create that intelligent abstraction layer. And like I said, that can be intelligence you build into the product, that can be AI, everybody's got a slightly different approach. But the idea goes back to what I just mentioned, which was, and actually I'll add another one in there. If an internal system is seen port scanning out to the internet and then is seen beaconing and it's talking to a blacklisted IP address, that's a compromised system. Well, if you think about the tools we have today, you kind of have to know that, right? I have to know that those 3 points, when you combine them together, is important enough to be absolutely definitive. Yeah, I got a compromised system. So what we're doing instead is focusing on building that intelligence into the product. So now when a junior analyst sits down, they don't need to know those 3 together is a problem. They'll be able to look at the dashboard that we have and see, oh, hey, it got 40 points because it was a beacon. It got another, 50 points because it was on the blacklist. And then there's another 10 points because of its scan. So the tool is telling us it's 100% certain this is a compromised system. That makes it a whole lot easier for them to get in. Now, that also kind of leads to, if you think about it from like the junior analyst perspective, what I find is they'll go through, they'll do their job, but then they get curious. It's like, well, how do you know it's a beacon? What was it about that? And you want to give them the ability to dive down into that data and to be able to show them this is what makes a beacon a beacon. This is how we're going in and doing the analysis. So you're not only creating a tool to help them do their job more quickly. And I spend an awful lot of time talking to customers to figure out how do we make this process faster? In other words, we will have good ideas come in on occasion that is, hey, we should be looking at this type of thing. But unless we can figure out how to make the overall time to threat hunt shorter by adding that feature versus longer, I'll usually kick it to the back burner until we can figure that aspect out. But
Oh, I love that.
Again,
yeah, that's great.
Oh yeah, because again, if you think about it, it isn't about the data, it's about solving the problem. And the problem is we might be compromised. Our goal as a software tool making a threat hunting product is how can we answer that question for you as quickly as possible? And I make sure that everybody stays, eyes on that prize.
Yeah, so the corollary for me to this is the vulnerability management space, right? I have lots of vulnerability data. How do I know which vulnerability is more important, right? So it's that prioritization of all this data. How do I know what are the things I should be looking at, right? And so what you've done is you've created these correlations of these different events, scored them in a way to help prioritize them to make those analysts' job a little easier to say, yeah, that looks suspicious. I need to do something about that. And,
yes,
and
exactly.
you see corollaries in other spaces as well.
Yep, I have, and that's actually an excellent example, Matt, is that I have 2 vulnerabilities that exist on my network. One has a severity that's twice as high as the other. They're both going to take 4 hours to fix. Which one do I fix first? Well, the double severity on one of them makes that a pretty easy choice, right? And yeah, it's exactly the same type of thing. The only real difference is that it's kind of identifying how important is this small aspect towards figuring out, is the system actually compromised or not? I'll give you another example. We're starting to look at digital certificates. So when a user goes out and talks to a system on the internet and we see that it's a TLS connection, we'll take a look at the digital certificate that went by. And we're looking at a couple of things. Is it a self-signed certificate? Yes or no? Has it been issued by let's say one of the common trusted authorities, or has it been issued by somebody who hands out free digital certificates? Is it an EV certificate? Now, I would never say that system is coming from a compromised system because it's self-signed versus being an EV cert. But if I'm looking at something that, let's say, has some beacon-like behavior to it, and I see it's got an EV cert versus a self-signed cert, yeah, that's going to shift the needle one way or another. I'm really big on, let's assign numbers. And I always kind of look at this from a 0 to 100 range. 0 is I am absolutely positive this system is safe. I don't need to worry about it. 100 is I am absolutely positive this is a compromised system. We need to kick in an incident handling mode. And everything we do tries to help people figure out where the needle is along that gauge.
So what's the value of this approach? I know some of the stuff you've talked about, it sounds like there's got to be some value in that confirmation, right? It's not an alert, it's an action, it's a guided action. But you've also talked a little bit about the operational efficiency. So what's the value that you're seeing from this? Either the value you intended to create, or what are you finding that your clients are gaining from this?
So it's more of an opportunity to actually be able to execute on this task. Again, there are some tools that have been out there for a while. There's a lot, when you look at the threat hunting space, when you look at the products that are there, a lot of them started off as security information and event management solutions. and now they're just kind of branding a threat hunting on it as well. So again, it's that, okay, here's a ton of data, and you better know what you're doing or you're never going to figure it out. I think moving towards simpler tools that do that work for you, it's kind of a natural progression, right? It's that when you first, well, at least when I develop software, it tends to go this way. The first release of the software I do usually has a decent sized user manual. AI Hunter right now has a 50-page manual. My goal is to get it down to 2 pages. And the way you do that is to stop pushing on your users, you're responsible for this, and you take that on and you deal with it yourself. And a lot of folks may look at it and say, well, wait, you can't make something this complex and not have a user manual. You can't make it that easy. And the thing I always love to push back on is the iPhone. How many people have an iPhone or an Android? How much time have you actually spent reading the manual for either of those devices? And I have yet to find anyone who even knows if a manual actually exists.
I just ask my kids; they just know where all the settings are, so it's okay.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Or you can take they try to make it intuitive enough so that you can kind of find your way there on your own if you have to. But yeah, kids work out great for that too.
So do you then? So the value is kind of to the incident response guys then, because if you can identify where systems have been compromised, that's really creating operational efficiency for the SOC as part of incident response and the forensics process, right? I mean, is that really where a lot of that value is being driven as part of the response and forensics process then?
Yeah, so where I see threat hunting in the future is right now you've got attestations like PCI that say, you must have a vulnerability scan. And if you think about that, a vulnerability scan identifies the likelihood you might be compromised. It doesn't actually answer that question. We have found that out in a couple of compromises where we've had credit card processing companies that were in the middle of a PCI audit and they were passing, finding out, oh, wait, we're compromised, and the audit never caught anything. Threat hunting fixes that, because threat hunting is that I'm actually going to look and go see if I'm compromised. I'm not going to look for signs like maybe I got vulnerable software, maybe I don't. I'm actually going to go look for root cause. And that to me is huge. And that to me is something that absolutely helps with operational efficiency, because most SOCs you talk to and you say, are we compromised? They're going to say no. And then you say, okay, how do you know? Well, no one's told us we're compromised. I haven't seen anything. Well, have you gone looking? Well, no, I haven't. So it's kind of that, yeah, you're blind, and we just can't keep running blind.
Oh, that's really interesting. In fact, that's an interesting. It feels like an evolution, right? That's a maturity evolution, as opposed to I'm looking for things that could be wrong. To I'm looking for proof that I'm actually compromised. I like that. Did I oversimplify it?
No. You hit it right on the head.
Matt, before we wrap this segment,
if it could have happened or not, I'm going to look to see, did it happen and can I pick up on it? And again, the nice thing about doing it on the network is it's all right there. If you understand IP, it's all right there. It's all easy to consume. One of the challenges you run into on the host side, actually you run into a bunch of challenges on the host side, but one of which is, malware is designed to hide itself. So if you're doing centralized logging and you're saying I'm threat hunting, no, you're not, because something that goes through and tries to hide its tracks is probably not going to generate any log entries at all. One of the earliest customers we have, this one's actually kind of it's funny for me because it's not my network. One of our earliest customers came in and said, hey, so we went through, we did a threat hunt, and we've got 3 IPs that are doing something we don't understand, but it looks like they're beaconing. It's a very solid beacon signal. They're doing it to Quanzhou, China, and we don't have a field office in Quanzhou, China, so we're not sure what's going on there. So we kind of helped out with it and found out that these 3 IP addresses were actually security cameras they had purchased. So they bought a bunch of IP-based cameras so they could put them up in the facility to see what was going on where. And these were 3 of the newest ones that they bought from a new vendor. We looked at that and said, no, this thing's calling home. It looks like it might be exfiltrating data. You probably don't want to have that on your network anymore. And it was about a month later that we found out that, that vendor was shipping it with malware, and there was a question about whether they knew the malware was there when they were shipping the product or not. So there was a situation where the world didn't know these cameras were compromised and collecting data and exfiltrating it out. And our product was able to go in and tag that, but it was an IP-based camera. If you're doing centralized logging and you're trying to do your threat hunting that way, number one, if you can get logs out of an Internet of Things device, it probably isn't going to give you the answers to the questions you need. And number two, most of these devices won't send to a centralized logging server. So if you're, when you say I'm doing threat hunting through my logs, okay, you're looking at some Windows systems and some Linux systems, but your printers, your routers, your IP-based cameras, all that stuff, you're totally blind to it. But go to the network, go to your connection point of the Internet, look for it there. Everything's right there to be picked through.
That's a great
that's
point.
the other value point, right? Is by being on the network, you're not just limited to Windows, Linux, Mac devices where you can load an agent. It's also going to support these IoT or industrial IoT devices that might be beaconing without any central logging or anything else.
Yeah. One of the test runs we did was John has a smart refrigerator, whacked that, and we wanted to make sure we could actually detect when his refrigerator was acting as a controlled host. Part of my background was I used to work security for a company. Actually, I used to run the security team for this company called Dyn. You might have heard of them. They brought the internet down about 2 years ago. Part of what happened at Dyn when that happened, when you look at the signature of majority of the systems that were involved in that DDoS attack, it was thermostats. It was, other random Internet of Thing devices that, again, if you're trying to just collect log entries to catch that stuff, you're never going to see it.
I love it. And we're going to get deeper into some of this when we bring Ron on here for the next segment. Matt, anything else in terms of problem, value, solution that we missed or that you think we should cover before we wrap this up?
This was a great overview, right? Threat hunting's always been one of those interesting markets. Where does it sit? Which vendors are in the best position to do it? How do you do it? So I think this helped a lot of people kind of understand the market a little better and some of the value by using more of a network-based approach.
Yeah, I picked some ideas out of it too, so I love that. All right, so with that, we're going to take a quick break, which is a good opportunity for you to go to securityweekly.com. Check out all the shows that we offer. Check out the on-demand content. Look at the writing we've got started. There's something for everyone, and if there's nothing for you, then read it again or send me a note and let me know what you're missing. When we come back, Ron Gula is going to join us in. We're going to talk with Chris about how ACM works, and as I promised, it's going to be a treat to think about how to think about these things differently. Back in a minute.